At milepost 148.5 on a stretch of two-lane highway with no gas station, no cell service for miles, and no people, there is a sign. It reads, Nothing. That is the actual name of the place. Founded in 1977 by a man named Richard Kenworthy, the town of Nothing, Arizona once had 4 residents, a gas station, and a taco stand. Today, it has none of those things. The building is still standing, half collapsed. The paint on its old sign faded almost past reading, and travelers still pull over just to photograph a town that, by any practical measure, no longer exists. What it does have is a closest working fire station roughly 30 minutes away, down a winding 2-lane road, through open desert, in the dark. If you crash here, on the road that connects Las Vegas to Phoenix, that 30-minute wait is not a worst-case estimate. It is the average. And this is only 1 mile marker on a highway that federal crash data has repeatedly ranked among the most dangerous in the entire United States. This is U.S. Route 93, 200 miles of asphalt cutting diagonally through the Mojave Desert, connecting 2 of the fastest-growing cities in America and killing people at a rate that outpaces almost every other highway in the country. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people make this exact drive, most of them without ever learning why certain stretches of it have earned the reputation they have, until the moment they're on it themselves, watching the sun go down over open desert with no city lights on the horizon in either direction. Before we go any further, if you have ever made this drive, or if you are planning to, stay with me, because what you are about to hear could genuinely change how you make this trip. And if you are the kind of person who likes knowing exactly what is waiting for you before you get in the car, consider subscribing, because this channel exists to map exactly that. Now, back to the road. To understand why this drive turns deadly after dark, you have to understand what this road actually is, geographically and physically, because the danger here is not folklore. It is engineering, geometry, and geography stacked on top of each other for 200 miles. U.S. 93 begins its journey through Arizona near Wickenburg at roughly milepost 199. Where it splits from US 60 and turns north into open desert. From there, it climbs and drops through Mojave County, through the community of Wickiup, past the ghost town of Nothing, through Kingman, and up toward the Nevada state line, before crossing the Colorado River and continuing on to Las Vegas. For most of its length, it runs through what planners call a rural, undivided highway environment. Translated out of bureaucratic language, 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, separated by nothing more than a painted stripe, at highway speed, in the dark, for hours at a time. For years, dozens of miles of this corridor have remained a simple 2-lane road, even as the Arizona Department of Transportation has spent more than $500 million upgrading other sections to a divided 4-lane freeway. That means for a meaningful stretch of your drive, the only thing standing between your vehicle and a semi-truck traveling the opposite direction at 70 miles an hour is a few inches of paint. There is no barrier. There is no median. There is no margin for a driver who drifts, who falls asleep, who is blinded by oncoming headlights, or who simply misjudges a curve in the dark. The physics of this matter more at night than almost any other time. Your headlights on a rural highway illuminate roughly the first 200 to 300 feet of road ahead of you, depending on your speed and whether you are running high beams. At 70 miles an hour, you are covering just over 100 feet every second. Do the math, and you have somewhere between 2 and 3 seconds of reaction time between the moment something appears in your headlights and the moment you reach it. A stalled vehicle, a patch of black ice on a winter night in the higher elevations, a cow that has wandered onto the pavement from unfenced desert range. In daylight, you might see that hazard from a quarter mile away and simply adjust your speed. At night on US 93, you may not see it until it is almost too late to stop. Then there is the traffic itself. Roughly 10,000 vehicles use sections of this highway on an average day. A mix of tourists heading to and from Las Vegas, commercial trucking between two major metro markets, and long-haul travelers who treat the drive as a straight shot rather than the demanding stretch of desert two-lane it actually is. Combine that volume with a road that narrows to 2 lanes in its most remote sections, and you get a highway where the margin for error, especially after sunset, is almost non-existent. One analysis of a single recent year found roughly 248 recorded accidents along the corridor, translating to odds of a crash for roughly every 15,000 vehicles that pass through. Spread across a full year and 200 miles of highway, that number can sound almost manageable. Concentrated into the specific hours after dark, on the specific miles that are still 2 lanes wide, it stops sounding manageable at all. This stretch of highway is officially designated the Joshua Forest Scenic Parkway, named for the dense groves of Joshua trees that line the road between Wickenburg and Kingman. And the name is not just cosmetic. The corridor climbs and drops through elevation changes of well over 1,000 feet as it crosses the desert, from roughly 2,000 feet near Wickenburg up past 3,000 feet, through the high desert around Nothing and Wickiup. That kind of elevation change means temperature swings, sudden crosswinds funneling through open valleys, and in winter, the possibility of ice on sections of road that a driver coming from Phoenix or Las Vegas has no reason to expect. A road that looks identical mile after mile can shift its driving conditions without any visual warning at all. It's worth saying plainly what this road is not. It is not a winding mountain pass with hairpin turns and cliffside drops, the kind of road that announces its danger visually the moment you see it. US 93 is deceptive precisely because it looks manageable. Long straightaways, wide open desert views, speed limits that invite you to relax. That relaxation is exactly what turns fatal. A 2018 analysis by the consumer research site Value Penguin, using federal crash data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Fatality Analysis Reporting System, identified 70 fatal crashes and 90 deaths on this stretch of US 93 between 2010 and 2016 alone. That analysis named the Arizona portion of US 93, specifically the section between Wickenburg and the Hoover Dam, the most dangerous highway in the entire United States. Not the most dangerous in Arizona, in the country. Part of what drives that number is not just how crashes happen here, but what happens after they happen. The same study found US 93 ranked 4th worst nationally for emergency medical response times, with an average wait of 21 minutes for injured crash victims to receive help. 21 minutes on a road with almost no cell coverage in its most remote sections is an eternity for someone with a survivable injury. It is the difference in trauma medicine between a person who makes it and a person who does not. Local fire officials have said as much publicly. Anthony Tunis, deputy chief of the Williamson Valley Baghdad Fire District, which covers part of this corridor, has explained that in a perfect world, ambulances would reach every crash within 10 minutes, no matter the location. That is not the world this highway operates in. It is rural Arizona, and a crash near the ghost town of Nothing means the nearest working fire station is a nearly 30-minute drive away, down the same winding 2-lane road that likely caused the crash in the first place. Now let's talk about the people this road has actually taken, because statistics only tell you so much. What they don't tell you is how ordinary the decisions were that led to each of these crashes. On the afternoon of July 24th, 2016, a charter bus carrying staff members of the Dallas Cowboys was traveling north on US 93, roughly 30 miles north of Kingman, on its way to a fan event in Las Vegas. On board were members of the team's front office, a videographer, the team's mascot, and the bus driver. No players were aboard. At an intersection along the highway, a van carrying 4 people attempted to turn left, crossing into the bus's lane. According to the Arizona Department of Public Safety, the van failed to yield the right-of-way. The 2 vehicles collided. All 4 occupants of the van died at the scene. They were later identified as Chinese nationals. The 52-year-old male driver, 2 women also 52 years old, and a 19-year-old woman. Investigators did not release whether the victims were related. Everyone aboard the bus survived with only minor injuries. The fan event scheduled for that afternoon, where dozens of people were already lined up waiting for autographs, was canceled within the hour. What makes this crash worth dwelling on is not the celebrity connection. It is the ordinariness of the failure. A left turn at an intersection on a highway most drivers assume is simple to navigate because it looks like open, empty desert. One misjudgment about how much time a driver had to cross 2 lanes of oncoming traffic. 4 people did not make it home. Crashes like it are not rare on this corridor. In a single vehicle head-on collision near Wickiup, a Honda passenger van drifted left of center into the southbound lane and collided with a semi-truck. The driver of the van died at the scene. And in a separate multi-vehicle crash on the same stretch near Wickiup, 4 people were killed and a 5th injured in a head-on collision, one of dozens of fatal incidents recorded along the roughly 80-mile section between the Wickenburg Junction at milepost 199 and the area just north of Wickiup at milepost 120. Arizona Department of Transportation crash data reviewed by investigative journalists found that 35 people died along this specific segment between 2015 and 2020 alone. That is a 5-year span on a stretch of road you could drive through in under 2 hours. News coverage from local Arizona outlets, drawing on Department of Public Safety reports, has also documented other fatal wrecks along the highway in the years since. A head-on collision between a sedan and a pickup truck in December 2017. A half-dozen vehicle pileup that left 2 people dead and 3 others injured. And among the crash victims identified over the years, 2 staff members from the Chandler Unified School District killed in a highway collision that made regional headlines back home in the Phoenix suburbs, hundreds of miles from where the crash actually happened. That distance is worth pausing on. The people who die on this highway are rarely locals making a routine trip through their own backyard. They are overwhelmingly travelers from somewhere else. People whose entire relationship with this road is a single trip between 2 cities, which means most drivers on US 93 at any given moment are encountering its risks for the first time, with no accumulated instinct for where the danger actually concentrates. Individually, each of these is a local news story that runs for a day and then disappears. Collectively, they are the reason this highway keeps appearing on national lists of the most dangerous roads in America. What stands out when you read through these incidents in sequence is how rarely the cause is anything exotic. Nobody in these stories was doing anything most drivers wouldn't recognize from their own trips. A left turn timed wrong. A vehicle that drifted a few feet across a center line with no shoulder to correct on. A stretch of road so visually uniform that a moment of inattention goes unnoticed until it's already too late to fix. On a 4-lane divided freeway, Several of these same mistakes would likely have ended in a fender bender or a rollover with survivors. On the narrow, undivided sections of US 93, the same mistake puts a vehicle directly into oncoming traffic at a closing speed that can exceed 130 miles an hour combined. That is the mechanism behind the death toll here. It isn't that drivers on this highway are worse than drivers anywhere else. It's that the road offers almost no forgiveness for the same errors drivers make everywhere. If you are watching this because you are actually planning to make this drive, and I suspect a lot of you are, this is the point in the video where that matters most, so let me say it directly. This is what all of these incidents have in common, whether we are talking about a distracted left turn or a vehicle drifting across the center line. They happen fastest and are survived least often on the two-lane undivided sections of this highway, in low light, at highway speed, with no physical barrier separating opposing traffic. If there is one variable you can control before you get in the car, it is when you leave. There's more to this story, including what this road looks like today, why it has become the centerpiece of one of the largest highway construction projects in the Southwest, and the one engineering decision that already proved this road's danger could be designed away. If a channel like this is useful to you, subscribing costs nothing, and it helps more people see it before they take a trip like this one. So far, everything we've covered points to the same underlying issue: a road built for a fraction of today's traffic, still catching up decades later. What comes next is where that catch-up effort stands right now, and how close it actually is to closing the gap. Now, back to the desert. If there is a symbol for how seriously officials eventually took this road's reputation, it is not a sign or a speed limit change. It is a bridge. For decades, US 93 crossed the Colorado River directly over the top of Hoover Dam, on a narrow, winding two-lane road built in the 1930s, with hairpin turns, blind curves, and pedestrian traffic from dam visitors mixing directly with highway trucks and buses. By the 2000s, that stretch was carrying roughly 14,000 vehicles a day, far more than it was ever designed for, and officials had identified it as dangerously inadequate as early as the 1960s. The solution was the Mike O'Callahan Pat Tillman Memorial Bridge, an 1,805-foot concrete arch spanning the Colorado River 890 feet above the water, roughly a quarter-mile downstream from the dam itself. Construction began in 2005. The bridge opened to traffic on October 19, 2010, at a cost of $240 million, and it remains the longest concrete arch bridge in the Western Hemisphere. It rerouted US 93 away from the hairpin turns atop the dam entirely. It is, by every available measure, safer than what came before it. That single project tells you everything about how the rest of this highway has been handled. Where the state has invested in rebuilding this road, divided lanes, wider shoulders, modern engineering, the danger has measurably dropped. Where it has not, the two-lane sections through the open desert, north of Wickenburg and south of Kingman, the numbers have stayed brutal. The Arizona Department of Transportation has been explicit about this trade-off. In public statements, the department has said that driver behavior, not road design, accounts for the large majority of crashes on the highway, roughly 94% by their own estimate. That statistic is worth sitting with because it means the agency responsible for this road is telling you, on the record, that the difference between a routine trip and a fatal one on the two-lane sections that remain comes down almost entirely to the choices made by the person behind the wheel, which brings us to what this road is becoming. US 93 through Arizona is the designated future route of Interstate 11, a planned freeway intended to eventually link Phoenix and Las Vegas with the kind of divided, limited-access highway that dramatically reduces head-on crash risk. That work is not theoretical. It's happening right now, in pieces, mile by mile. The Arizona Department of Transportation has completed close to 20 separate projects since 1999 to convert sections of this corridor from 2 lanes to a divided 4-lane highway. In December 2020, crews finished converting a 3-mile section north of Wickiup, connecting two previously separate divided stretches into one continuous run. In late 2024, ADOT completed a 5-mile widening project through Wickenburg itself. As of the most recent state figures, the majority of the 200-mile drive between Wickenburg and the Nevada state line has already been converted to 4-lane divided highway, and fewer than 40 miles remain the original 2-lane road. 40 miles sounds small next to 200. It is not small if you were the one driving it in the dark. Those remaining 2-lane segments are scattered through some of the most remote parts of the corridor, and several more projects are already funded to close those gaps in the coming years. A widening project near Cane Springs north of Wickiup, additional work near Big Jim Wash, and a new interchange in Kingman connecting US 93 with Interstate 40 that alone carries a price tag of more than $100 million. Until every one of those projects is finished and the state's own construction schedule stretches out toward the end of this decade, the 2-lane gaps in this highway continue to carry the same risk they always have, opposing high-speed traffic separated by paint, run by drivers who often don't know the road's history until it's too late. There is also the matter of what the desert itself does to a driver over the course of 200 miles. This is not a highway with rest stops every 20 minutes. Long sections run through terrain with no services, no lighting, and outside the towns of Wickiup and Kingman, very little to keep a driver alert. Fatigue on a straight, monotonous desert road is its own documented hazard, distinct from but compounding everything else. A driver who has been on the road for 3 or 4 hours in the dark on a highway with almost no visual variation is a driver whose reaction time is already compromised before anything unexpected even enters the roadway. Add a curve that arrives faster than expected, a vehicle stopped on the shoulder without hazard lights, or another driver drifting toward the center line, and you have the exact conditions that have produced the fatal crashes we've already discussed. Night driving compounds this in one more way that's easy to overlook. Much of Arizona's rural desert is designated open range, meaning livestock are legally permitted to be present on or near the roadway in unfenced areas, and wildlife activity in the desert increases significantly around dusk and through the night, when temperatures drop and animals move to feed. A driver's eyes take time to adjust between the glare of oncoming headlights and the darkness beyond them. And on a highway with no ambient lighting for miles at a stretch, that adjustment period is exactly when a large animal on the pavement becomes invisible until it's directly in your headlight beam. Combine that with a driver already several hours into a fatiguing overnight drive, and you have a second, quieter hazard layered on top of everything the road's design already works against you. None of this means the highway is impossible to drive safely. Thousands of people complete this trip every single day without incident. What the data consistently shows is that risk on this specific road is not evenly distributed across all conditions. It concentrates in a narrow set of circumstances: the 2-lane, undivided segments, hours of darkness, and driver fatigue or distraction layered on top of both. Daylight hours, divided sections, alert drivers, none of these eliminate risk entirely, but they measurably reduce it. Every serious incident we've covered tonight happened at the intersection of at least 2 of those risk factors, often all 3. That is really the pattern underneath everything on this road. Not a cursed stretch of asphalt, not a single haunted mile marker, but a fundamental mismatch between how the highway was built decades ago for a fraction of today's traffic and how it's actually being used now by tens of thousands of daily travelers moving between two major American cities at night at speed on a road that in long stretches still hasn't caught up to the volume it carries. The state knows this. The construction happening on Interstate 11 right now is the state's own admission of it. Until that project reaches the remaining two-lane gaps, the fundamentals that have defined this highway for the past 2 decades remain unchanged. So if you're planning this drive, here is what that 30-minute emergency response time at a place called Nothing actually means for you. It means that on the sections of this highway still running 2 lanes at night, with headlights that show you barely 3 seconds of road ahead at highway speed, the margin between a completed trip and a life-altering one is thinner than it looks from the driver's seat. Locals who drive this route regularly plan around it, timing the desert crossing for daylight when they can, treating the 2-lane stretches with the seriousness a mountain pass gets automatically, keeping a full tank and a charged phone because coverage disappears for miles at a stretch, and never assuming that a straight open desert road is a relaxed one. We began this video at milepost 148.5 at a sign that says nothing, standing in the middle of a highway that has taken far more than nothing from the people who've driven it. The bridge over Hoover Dam proves this route can be engineered into something far safer than it once was. The construction happening on both ends of this corridor right now, in Wickenburg, at Cane Springs, at the new Kingman interchange, proves the state knows the rest of the work isn't finished either. But proof of progress is not the same as the drive being finished. And for as long as those 2-lane gaps remain, the fundamentals stay exactly the way they've been for the last 2 decades. Somewhere between Wickenburg and Kingman tonight, the desert is quiet, the road looks empty, and your headlights only reach so far. That emptiness is what makes this highway feel safe long before it proves otherwise. If you're making this drive, make it in daylight if you possibly can. And if darkness is unavoidable, drive it like you already know what's waiting past the reach of your headlights. Because on this road, more than most, that is exactly what decides who gets where they're going. And if you've driven this road yourself, day or night, tell us what it was like down in the comments. We read everyone, and we take your stories seriously when we plan the next drive we cover.